Hi, my name is Samantha Stark. I'm the director of Framing Britney Spears. It's our new film. It's now streaming on FX and Hulu. And this is Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Day. I'm a senior editor with the New York Times' documentary TV show called The New York Times Presents, and I worked on Framing Britney Spears with Samantha.
Something that I think will be really cool to share during this little Q&A with each other is Liz, is it true that you gave birth to a baby 2 days before the film premiered?
It is true that I gave birth to my first baby, a beautiful little girl named Claudia, 2 days before the film premiered. And I was pregnant during the making of this and listened to so much Britney Spears that I think that Claudia will always forever find comfort in her music. And I think it was really interesting in working on the story and doing reporting. Something that I learned a lot about was Britney as a mother. And she was very clear from a young age that she wanted to be a mother. Kids were really important to her. And I really connected personally with where I was in that space as well.
I think it was incredible to see, since this was your idea in the first place, Liz, this film, it was incredible for me to be able to go on this journey with you, to have finally like two of your babies be born at the same time. And I was just so amazed, what Liz appears in the film. And you were 8 months pregnant when you did that interview, that filmed interview.
Yes, 8 months pregnant.
Do you feel like you understood maybe like where Britney was coming from or anything going on with her because you were pregnant during while this was being filmed?
Absolutely. Brittany talked a lot from a very young age about how important, starting a family and having kids was to her. And then pretty soon after she became a mother, she immediately gets a lot of attention from the tabloids who brand her as an unfit mother and a lot of criticism of her mothering skills. And I think you can see throughout the film the way that perhaps, really affected her. And I think, I had a lot more sympathy towards her than I knew at the time when everyone was joking about, her driving with her baby in her lap and all these other perceived, mothering mistakes. It really helped me understand more where she was coming from.
We were talking about chronology in the film and making sure the film was mostly in chronological order. And to me, something that really came out of this chronology, Liz and I and our associate producer, Mel, we all put this like super, super long, detailed timeline together of every big moment in Britney's, career trajectory and tabloid trajectory. And a lot of things came to light when we looked at it that way. And one of them, I think, was how this was all really happening right when she was becoming a mother, having two children right after another, and then also going through a divorce right away and a custody battle. And this is all when the tabloid machine was becoming so huge that we see this footage of 60 men following her around and blocking her wherever she's going, and calling her a bimbo on TV and confronting her with headlines. Matt Lauer, Britney America is saying you're a bad mom, and it even this idea that she had two hospitalizations in the month of January, right before the conservatorship, and that was also right when the struggle to maintain, visitation rights of her kids was coming to a head. It gave me an entirely new perspective on what was going on, and how mean spirited we were toward her was, exponentially more devastating because of that. And so I think having much of the film in chronological order can really make you understand what was going on outside the frame of that one head shaving photo, or of, Britney in an ambulance.
Totally agree. Let's also back up for a second and start with where each of us was coming from, both in regard to our perspective on Britney's career, and also what we knew about her conservatorship and whether that changed from the beginning of the project to when the documentary aired.
I guess where I was coming from, Liz, we work for the New York Times. We made this for the New York Times Presents. And that means I think we come up and make our documentaries a little differently. We make them really as a team. And so, Liz, I know you pitched this story. So, do you want to talk about where you were coming from, and then I'll take it from where.
Sure. So I have long wanted to see a documentary made about Britney Spears because I've always felt a nostalgic connection to her. We're in a similar age group, and I remember back in high school, she was idolized as America's Golden Girl, and so beautiful and perfect, or seemingly perfect. And then I also remember in my early 20s watching, during her public struggles, just watching her get battered by the paparazzi and the tabloids and, everyone who just laughed along with a lot of those jokes made at her expense. So I thought that she would be a good person to re-examine, to go back through the historical record and, try to learn something about ourselves by learning or by re-examining, how we judged her and treated her. And then in terms of the conservatorship, I had been aware of it and the apparent contradiction that it could pose, where Britney, in the last few years has been presented as a superstar, able to perform in Las Vegas at a very high level and make millions of dollars, but at the same time be deemed so ill and at risk that she needs this intense layer of legal protection. And I think I was very interested in trying to wrap my head around how those two things could both be true.
Yeah, I know. So, I was kind of gifted this. We're going to do a documentary on Britney Spears. Here's our, some research that we started. And I didn't know much about Britney Spears at all. I grew up with her because I'm about the same age as her, but I had never known, followed her that much except for realizing I kind of had this feeling as a teenager that Britney was this ideal woman that I couldn't live up to. And so I guess I had jealousy feelings toward Britney or negative feelings toward her, maybe that she was too like straight or boring or regular or something. And when I started doing research for the film, I realized how extraordinarily incorrect that was. Britney was a rebel her whole career. She was constantly trying to be in control of what she was doing. She was super creative, was really in charge of her career at the beginning of her career, and choosing what kinds of performances she was going to do, what kinds of music videos she was going to make. Um, and so the first thing I wanted to know is why did I have those feelings toward her? And in watching all this media coverage and reflecting even now, when everyone's been a lot of people talking about it after the film came out, kind of realizing how, me watching this person be asked these questions and be covered like this, as a peer, how much it must have affected my development and everyone around us to be watching, it's okay for a young woman to be treated this way. And I think maybe that's why I had those feelings toward her, which is so sad because to me, I think it's not really only a story of celebrity at all. It's like the way that we saw Britney being treated was the way that it was okay to treat all young women then. And I think that was a huge transformation that I had over watching, in watching this. Um, I also didn't really know much about her conservatorship at all. I don't think most people did. When I tell people now, Britney's been in this 13-year conservatorship, people have no idea what I'm talking about, or they're really surprised. And so, as this is while we're researching this and talking to people, these court filings start happening, right? We didn't know, Liz, when we started that Britney was going to start indicating she wanted things to change in her conservatorship because it had been so stagnant for so long. And so that really started becoming a huge mystery in the film. How can Britney perform at this level and make millions of dollars and still not be able to make very basic decisions for herself, like what kind of healthcare treatment she has, where she lives, what kind of business deal she goes into, what to do with her money. And so all of those things made it super potent ground, I think, to make a really nuanced film.
Yeah, I would add one additional thing to, from my perspective of, a transformation or a new understanding that I got through working on this documentary was, I think, in terms of Britney's career and her talent, I had sort of just assumed the general assumption out there about her, which is, she was kind of a puppet. She didn't have much control over her own success, and kind of just a fluffy pop star. And in going back and, reporting the story and talking to people closely involved, I learned that wasn't the case at all. And I really developed a big appreciation and respect for her and her work and how hard she worked in particular too, nonstop touring and nonstop press. And it felt like to me, she earned every penny of the fortune that she made and that she, cannot control today.
Yeah, I think something also, one of my favorite parts of being a journalist is being able to go into a topic or a story or a person and say, you know, these are all the assumptions I have about this. Tell me why I'm wrong. And I think with Britney, that really happened a lot. So I'm kind of glad I came at it without being a fan first or someone who had known a lot about it, because I could present the assumptions I think most people in our culture have had about her, and then have people prove me wrong. And I think that comes out in the film a lot also. So we both talked about the importance of approaching this story, Liz, with empathy, right? Can you talk about why that was particularly important to you?
I think that was important to me because one, Brittany was not able to participate. As we note in the last card in the film, we are not, we made a lot of effort to reach her, but we're not sure whether those requests were received by her directly. So whenever you make a story about someone without their participation or their blessing or their insight, I think you want to be really careful about, people who claim to speak for Britney, but, exactly how they know things is unclear, or people who want to say things, off the record, but are not willing to say or share things on the record or help you corroborate it elsewhere. So I think that was really important for us. And I think also just empathy was important because when we went back and looked through the archival and the tabloids and just the general perception of Britney, there was not a lot of empathy. So it felt like, a new lens to put on her story and a new way for people to, rethink what they thought they knew about Britney.
Yeah, I think it was hard to know this is the first thing, and hopefully the only thing I've made really without the participation of the central person in it. And I think to me, and I know to you too, it was so important to not be able. We wanted to make something where we weren't having anyone assume what was inside Britney's head. And I think we followed that from the conception all the way through the edit. This really, really trying to be okay, people, tell us your story from your firsthand perspective of what you saw, or tell us things about our culture that happened, but nothing to say. And Britney thought this, and Britney, you know, I am. I imagine Britney was thinking this. We just wanted nothing in Britney's head. We can't assume what's in Britney's head. When people ask me what I think of her Instagram, I also want to say I can't assume what's in Britney's head, because we can't. And so I think our culture and the way we treated her became a real central character in the film.
So let's talk about what didn't end up making it into the documentary, either for time or other challenges. I think there's so much too that we could have included, or, if we had a 10-part series. And some things I would be more interested in having included if we had more time, includes Britney at one point in, around 2010, her boyfriend slash later fiance, and he's also her manager, becomes a co-conservator of her personal life. And I wish we could have explored that further. I think that must have been a very interesting dynamic to have your boyfriend or your partner also be, in charge of having special powers and decision making ability over your personal life. I would have loved to explore that. And then just in terms of the archival, there's just loads and loads of fascinating footage that, I wish we could have included for time, including, 2 months after Britney gave birth to her second child, the paparazzi take this very graphic upskirt of her. And, the reaction is from the public is kind of just to laugh. Whereas today that, would be a crime in many states. There's also a really great, the director of MTV's For the Record, this documentary made in the first year of Britney's conservatorship, released some unseen footage. And there's a great clip in which the filmmaker asked Britney, do you want people's sympathy? And she says, no, I don't want people's sympathy. I just want, their understanding, and I want some privacy, and I'd like a day off. And that felt to me just, like it encapsulated a lot of what we learned about Britney from people close to her.
The way that you said this idea that Britney's boyfriend was a conservator over her at one point and making decisions for her, I think it was hard to include it in the film, because when you gloss over it like that, it's like, wait, what? Her boyfriend was a conservator over her. There's all these kind of shocking things in Britney's story that there's so much more to tell about it.
So we shot much of this project in 2020 with COVID restrictions in place. Sam, can you talk a little bit about the challenges in filming with that?
So making a documentary in COVID is challenging because there's not so much you can film, right? People are not doing things as much. And so we were, really happy that we could film outside the courthouse to at least have some kind of momentum. And then also to use all this archival footage, which is really, the heart of the story. But we had to film all our interviews outside because we followed COVID restrictions so extremely. And I never realized how challenging filming outside would be because of the noise of the world. Our very first interview spot that we chose, we did not realize that it was under a flight path for private planes in LA coming from the beach back to the hills directly over. And we would have to stop every 2 minutes. God bless the people who were a part of that interview because they were so patient with us. But the elements of that, and then one time we were renting out spaces in like people's backyards basically to film in. And at one point we went to a place that it happened to be gardening day, but it was the same group of gardeners who would go to all the houses on the street. So it was one by one, not all at once. And everyone was so patient. I think it kind of forced us to make stylistic choices that I really liked how they ended up. For example, we had to film outside, so I didn't want that decision to be unmotivated in the film. I didn't want it to just be everyone's randomly outside. And so I was trying to figure out what we could do. And I was looking at Britney's Instagram, and Britney's Instagram really has such an outside world in it. It's so much in this sunny California backyard with greenery. There's so many flowers and roses. Britney loves roses. They're all throughout her Instagram. And so I thought it would be really neat to get one of these rose walls made, or, a wall covered in roses. And so we decided to do that. And we made the roses really dense for the fans, and then kind of sparser flowers for other people. And after we were filming a little while, Britney started posting about the Rose Project on her Instagram. And we were really surprised because we also had a Rose Project. And then, it just kind of made everything come together, like the film in the world of her Instagram. So I think that was, it worked out. One thing is I did a lot of interviews remotely. I did them in person in LA and Mississippi. And in the rest of the places, I beamed in on an iPad attached to the camera. So we called me Robot Sam because I would be like, my face was on an iPad talking to them. We had a Bluetooth speaker that we would put next to them so they could hear me. So my voice was shooting up at the person. And yeah, our associate producer, Mel Ben Cosme, did a lot of the field work in New York, and we would Robot Sam me in. So that was a challenge, but also fun. But what about you, Liz? Did you feel like, pregnant in the middle of a pandemic, trying to investigate Britney Spears?
Yeah, I think, my challenges were a little bit different than like the production filming challenges, but I would have in a traditional investigative story, I would have gone out a lot more and gotten on a plane and flown down to Louisiana and knocked on doors and done the same in California. And both because of COVID and being pregnant, pregnant women are at higher risk of serious illness if they get COVID. I was basically on lockdown. So we still accomplished a lot, on the phone, writing letters and non face to face reporting. But I think that definitely would have played out differently if COVID wasn't such a concern.
Liz, there's a legitimate question about why or how Brittany wasn't involved in the documentary. Can you elaborate what the process was like on trying to get in contact with her and request her involvement?
Sure. So we tried to reach Brittany through various different ways, through official channels like her publicist, her manager, her court appointed counsel, also through intermediaries who are close to her, friends and family and associates. And through her Instagram and basically all different ways. We really tried very hard. One thing that we note in the film, or Joe Coscarelli, the New York Times reporter, notes in the film, is that it's very hard for journalists to interview Brittany freely. She has a very tight circle. Her media requests are very tightly controlled. The conservatorship also has protections around her. So I think in some ways we weren't surprised that we weren't able to get her to participate, but I think not even getting a response or knowing whether or not she fully, truly received the requests was somewhat surprising. I'd also note too that, at the end of the film, we have a card where we list the principals named in the film who we tried to contact to request on camera interviews, who either, did not respond or declined to appear on camera. I think based on questions that I've gotten after the film is premiered, some people assumed, oh, are those the only people you reached out to? Why didn't you reach out to X and Y? So I'd just like to clarify that we had a gigantic spreadsheet of over 1,000 names of people involved in Brittany's life at various points who we contacted. And, we spoke to a lot of people on background. It was a challenge to get people to go on camera for various reasons. It's an ongoing court case, celebrity, involving medical privacy, attorney-client privilege, all sorts of reasons why people would be hesitant to go on camera. But we did talk to a lot of people that informed our reporting.
So another important aspect of framing Britney Spears is that it's told really from a female perspective. So why don't we talk about why we felt that was an important thing to do?
Sure. Sam, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I mean, when coming onto the project and starting to do research all about Britney Spears, I started realizing how much of the coverage was written by men or produced by men. So many of the voices that we hear commenting on her are voices of men. And since I think we've seen by the reaction from this, but we treat women really differently now. When you look back at the footage that wasn't that long ago, 2000 through 2008, it's shocking and appalling to us how why was it okay to ask a teenager if she was a virgin, and put it on TV? Why was it okay to talk about her breasts on TV? Why was it okay to ask her if she was a bad mom on TV or confront her with these headlines? A big thing that was a kind of this thing people would do back then is confront Britney with horrible tabloid headlines about her and then try to have her react to them on screen. I would hope we wouldn't do that anymore. It looks kind of very shocking when you look at it now, but it didn't back then, and no one had ever talked about it really publicly. Like there weren't outcries about it back then. And I just wonder if so many of the gatekeepers were not men, if it would have changed. I don't know, but I do know that my perspective on watching how she was being treated was probably different. So we wanted to do that. I also think I tried really hard, as much as we could, to have all female film crews at all the shoots, which is very, very rare. It was the first thing anybody commented on when they walked in. You know, we would have me, a female cinematographer, a female second camera, two production assistants. We have our whole producing team, Liz and Mel, and our executive producer, Mary. Um, and it just set this different precedent, I think, when people walked into the room or into the outside to be interviewed, they just started acting differently. You could tell right away because they knew we wanted to know something different than kind of what was out there. You could tell it was just this different, like, either no matter who it was, like, I have to prove to you that I know what I'm, that I'm thinking thoughtfully about this and condemning some of the stuff that was happening, or oh, okay, there's no pressure to try to have to, um, you know, explain myself when I'm talking about feminism. I can just say it, and I do think it just gave a whole different thing. We also had some great men involved. Our editors were men, and sometimes some of the crew members were. But I do think it's like came from a really different perspective, which was really valuable. Because not? Why not do something different? And the last thing I'll say is, whenever I was telling people I was doing a project about Britney Spears, a reaction a lot of people gave was kind of like this smirk, or like, oh, Britney Spears, like belittling her just by hearing her name. And I found that so horrifying. And I wanted to make something that would kind of wipe the smirk off of people's faces, because this is a really important, real, serious story about, one of the hugest, most successful women, technically, and also just a story about how we treat teenage girls and women in general. And I know we all, on our first meeting together, promised that we would never make fun of Britney Spears in the piece. And I really think, like, starting that on the first day as the precedent really, kind of solidified what we were doing. We're not making fun of Britney Spears. Everybody makes fun of Britney Spears. It's not happening here. And I think that was really enforced, through the perspective that we had.
Yeah, I would just add that I had never before my career worked on a team that was so female. As Sam pointed out, not only the director producer, many of the cinematographers, our wonderful associate producer, Melanie, our archival producer, just tons of women, including our showrunner, Mary Robertson. And that, just lent a new perspective. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to work and had that experience. I also think, obviously, there's a universality to Britney's story that anyone can relate to. But I think for women in particular, you recognize yourself in many of her moments, particularly early on in her career. And you reflect a little bit more about things you may have internalized. So I think that's really cool. And then lastly, just also through the lens of gender, you know, obviously it always feels good when other journalists, comment on a documentary and the reception and what they think about it. But I always also kind of judge the success of a piece in reaching people when I hear from, everyday civilians, normal people who are not journalists consuming every piece of journalism, and the reception and the number of inquiries I've gotten from, people I went to high school with who I haven't spoken to in a very long time, people from my hometown, 99% women saying, oh my God, like this story and those archival moments, like, wow. So I judge, I feel really great about the impact the film has made because it's reached so many people outside of kind of the journalist bubble.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Liz. Something that really moved me so much was to see the "We Are Sorry Britney" hashtag trending on Twitter, and people talking about that a lot. This idea that, people watched that and took away that they should be sorry for how she was treated was so, like, beyond anything I could have imagined that this would do, and it made me so, like, so moved to see that. And I think that the reactions have been so positive. and comments so positive. And I think actually a lot of that has to do with this idea that we were so mean spirited toward her, and it's like such a culture for us to tear each other down in internet comments, that I think people absorbed that from the film and decided to not do that ever. Being able to start at a place of respecting each other and to be non-judgmental and kind toward each other, from the beginning. Um, the fact that people took that away from the film was so important to me. And Brittany, Felicia calls Brittany stop and smell the roses kind of girl, and someone who is the most non-judgmental person she's ever met. And to think about all the judgment Brittany faced, I really like this idea that people are coming away from the film trying to be less judgmental.
There's also been a lot of conversation regarding the different perspective those in the queer community particularly have and always have had regarding the treatment and reception of Brittany. Samantha, can you expand on what you've learned about this through making the documentary?
Yeah, I was very, I came to the courthouse. I guess my first introduction to Britney fans was coming to the courthouse where there were Free Britney protesters outside, and looking around and talking to people and realizing how many of Britney's kind of fiercest supporters are queer people, was a little surprising to me in a way. I was trying to figure out why I'm queer, and I thought that was really like fascinating because it just wasn't what I was expecting with someone that I remember being kind in like the schoolgirl outfit, kind of that starting out. But it makes so much sense when you think about how much Britney was judged and criticized for her sexuality at such a young age as a teenager. And like, who else is criticized for their sexuality and judged for it as teenagers and as young people. And I think a lot of people seeing Britney kind of be herself anyway and give this message that you can make fun of me and I'm just going to be myself. I'm not going to try to please you. Really inspired a lot of people. I think I heard so many stories from particularly gay men who were boys when she came out, who said that her attitude and watching her kind of uh, be herself and spread love no matter what made it okay for them to come out and made it okay for them to seek mental health treatment. And it was this really serious connection that I wasn't expecting, when you think of a pop star. She's also she also won a GLAAD Media Award, which I didn't realize, and always does these Spirit Day videos for kids, wear purple on Spirit Day if you support your LGBTQ peers, and kind of behind the scenes has done a lot. And it was that was surprising to me. I heard this one story that I wish had made it in, from this young boy, or he was young. He was a 14-year-old, a freshman in high school, David. I heard it from him and Felicia independently, that he came one time to a Britney concert when he was 14, and he handed her a handwritten letter and left, and she read it, and it was talking about how, since he was little, none of the kids would sit with him in the cafeteria, and he had a Britney Spears lunchbox, and he would put it on the table and pretend that he was eating lunch with Britney Spears. And he kind of was with her, and when he was a freshman, he was having a lot of trouble being gay and having a lot of mental health issues, and he said it was okay for him to get inpatient treatment and seek treatment because of Britney. And he gave her that note, and Felicia said she cried and sent her out to get his address, and then she wrote him his sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school, and she sent him tickets to come see her again when he was a junior. And he said to her, if no one else, or she said to him, if no one else ever says they're proud of you, know that I'm proud of you. And that story changed my whole perspective on Britney. This was when she was in Las Vegas. This was when she was under conservatorship, and she was having this kind of long-term connection with this boy, this young person. He said it really felt like she felt like, since she has sons, that maybe she had like a motherly feeling toward him. And those kind of stories completely floored me, because it was really different from the media narrative, other people media narrative that we've gotten of Britney so far. So Liz, a lot of people, around the world seem to be grappling with this wider culpability of, everyone, how we consumed Britney, how we were culpable in what happened to her. So do you want to talk about reaction to that and where you are at with this idea of culpability?
Sure. I've felt very surprised and shocked at the conversations that have been sparked by the documentary. Pleasantly surprised. I think it's really interesting to watch, people grapple with their own culpability. Personally, I've also thought a lot about my own culpability with Britney's story. As I mentioned earlier, in my early 20s, I was reading Us Weekly and Star Magazine and Perez Hilton and TMZ, and certainly, probably, fueling that appetite for the paparazzi and the tabloids to cover her in the way that they did. I also think, something I've been thinking a lot in watching, the conversations on Twitter about culpability is I really hope that it helps um, promote some thinking about who we might be doing this to today, and change some behaviors going forward. So I think it's really interesting to watch this reexamination of the past, but I hope it doesn't end there. I hope people grapple with, who might be getting unfairly judged and treated today, and how can we, change the conversation moving forward.
Yeah, I've also been thinking a lot about a lot of people have said, I laughed at those jokes. I'll never laugh at those jokes again, which I feel like that is really um, amazing because it's kind of the lowest part of this, right? So there's all these people that are doing this, making the jokes, putting it on TV, putting it in the magazines, buying the magazines, but also if you just think about that you laughed at one of these jokes, that's I feel like that's really thinking about it. The other thing that I have been thinking about is, there's demands on certain public figures to make apologies, and I think that those are symbolic and good. But I also think, for example, we showcase this music video from Justin Timberlake, and I'm thinking about, he's the face of the music video, but how many people that went through and how many yeses that concept got before it it reached air, and how many people made it the one of the most successful music videos he had, his successful album. And I hope that all those people, everybody who worked on the music video, is thinking about their role in it also, because it is systemic. It's not just the people that we whose faces we see.
That's a great answer. Sam, so if we had been able to talk to Brittany, what would we have asked her?
I think I would have asked her what she wants us to know. What do you want us to know? And I would have asked her, would you like to take this camera and film whatever you want with it? And I can't wait until she is able to do that. I hope she is, if she wants to. I hope she is.
I totally agree. I'd want her to, I'd want to ask her, what do you want the world to know? What are the public misperceptions out there about you and your situation? I'd be interested to know, why she no longer wants, or why she does not want her father in control of her money, and just provide her a direct platform to, set the record straight on various things.
We'd want her to be unfiltered, her whatever she wants to say, right?
Absolutely. So, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We really enjoyed having this conversation. You can find Framing Britney Spears streaming now on Hulu by searching for The New York Times Presents, along with previous episodes of the series, including The Killing of Breonna Taylor.